Jeez. Hello, everybody. Hope you're ready to get fucking sleepy, dude. I accidentally slept for most of today, so I feel sleepy. So, oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me to bump the volume up. One sec. Beep ba 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 ba. How's that sounding? Can you hear me? Also, does Twitch still say I'm playing Dial Town? Because I am not. Oh my god, it keeps changing it. Okay, so I'm just chatting today. Sorry about that. I always change it beforehand, and Twitch always changes it back, which really makes me want to shit myself. But you know, what can you do? So today is the long-awaited lo-fi reading stream, which I promised fucking ages ago. It was a channel reward, I think. It was a points reward. So I'm extremely excited to have you all here. I am gonna grab a blanket though, because it is chilly in here. One sec. Ugh. Okay, blanket acquired. Also, you guys also have to get a blanket, and you have to be cozy. That's the rule. You have to be cozy during this whole stream, and if you aren't, I'm coming for you. And then you will no longer be cozy, but this time, it'll be my fault. So today, Lavender is joining us. Hi, Zach. We're doing a really sleepy, nice stream today, and I'm super excited. I should have gotten, like, a sweater or something. See, I'm just too peaceful. I'm just doing my dream too, or I'm doing my job too good. I'm already dreaming. Are we excited for this? Y'all are cute. So, after this, I'm going to put up another poll, because as you can see above me, I have a list of 8 different books that I can read tonight, and I am perfectly content to switch between all of them. It is entirely up to you guys. So if we are reading a story, or you want to explicitly request your story, or your preference rather, from the list, donate. Wait, there we go. I always forget the camera's reversed. Donate, and we will change it to whatever you wish, and then you can pick one from the list. So it's gonna be up to you guys, but after this little poll, I am going to see sort of what genre y'all are going for. So I'm really excited to see what we end up with. I'm in the PMW. Can I go without a blanket and just be comfy? Yes. I don't know what PMW is, so yes, absolutely. God Air, what's your bunny's name? Because I've had mine for a few months now. Thank you, Marcus, for the bits. You know, I probably could have gone with more peaceful sounding alerts for this one, huh? But just couldn't resist my fun little chip tunes. Oh, Pacific Northwest. Oh, okay. It was yeah. Absolutely go without a blanket for your own safety. Christ God, good luck out there. I do not envy you right now. Don't know if I'll stay. Not very sexy tonight, boys. Good luck, Zach. I hope you're feeling okay. You better be saying that you're not feeling very sexy, and not that I am not very sexy. I love you regardless, but if you are having a bad time right now, this might help calm you down. It's totally up to you. Oh, a tie between yes and duh. This is thrilling. I have my elephant and my panda, so I'd say pretty cozy. Fuck yeah, Jack. Stevie, if you make me sleep, I'll be more than satisfied. It's literally 3 a.m. and insomnia sucks. Kofik, I do not envy you even a little bit. Their name is Velvet. That's so good. That's so very good. Thank you, Zach. Thank you. No, you're still sexy as fuck, King. Okay. So I'm going to put this over on this screen so I can see that info as well. No, the Graveyard book is absolutely one of my favorites. It has been since like 5th grade. My older sister Micah got it for me for Christmas one year, and that was definitely her trying to push me towards better taste, and you know, it worked. So, let me see. Okay, so Twitch only lets me put like 5 choices up there, so I'm gonna say what genre we want first. So the genres I have are like, I'd say mystery. Well, Okay, eerie, spooky, I don't know. Pre-1950, I think. Fantasy, and anarchy, or education. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. I feel good about that. Yeah. Like, okay, spooky, pre-1950. Hey, was Murder on the Orient Express written before 1950? Because I sure feel like it was. I'm pretty certain it was. Oh, yeah. 1934. There we go. We'll be just fine then. Perfect. Okay, boys. 2-minute poll. Let's go. There we go. It's an old-ass book. It very much is. So you can probably tell Spooky is going to cover Welcome to Night Vale or The Graveyard Book. Pre-1950 is going to be the ones on the second line, Great Gatsby or Murder on the Orient Express. The fantasy ones are The Little Prince, Princess Bride, and Inkheart. And education is Anarchy for Beginners. It's looking like Spooky is really pulling ahead right now. Fantasy is also getting up, though. I should have figured y'all would want a spooky one. Somehow that's on brand. I do love Neil Gaiman, though. Speaking of Neil Gaiman, Good Omens Season 2 is now available. Or no, wait, that's a lie. Is now confirmed. Holy shit. Is now confirmed, and I am so goddamn excited. Oh my god, that is still my favorite show. I am extremely excited for that shit. That reminds me, I wonder how soon is too soon to Murder on the Orient Express by players. Don't do them. Don't do them. I want my beautiful Eldritch Horror in Cecil. No, the book is quite good. I haven't read it in years, though, like since high school, so hoping it's as good as I remember, but I do remember enjoying it very much, and I think I am also more accepting of surrealism now than I used to be. Okay, Spooky is definitely gonna win then. So for that, we've got a couple. Although I suppose that Murder on the Orient Express would also qualify as spooky. I should also clarify, none of them are like scary. I would never read you horror before bed. When I say spooky, I mean like kind of surreal. And The Graveyard Book is literally a children's story. So like, even though it does start with something a little spooky, it ends up becoming really, really heartwarming. And if you'd like, I can also skip that part, the spooky part. Okay. Which book? No, I would never do that to you. Okay, so Welcome to Night Vale is very surrealist, it's very fascinating. If you're familiar with the podcast, it is quite good, and it is a little funny. But this one, it leans towards nihilism, but it does end up having a good message to it. The Graveyard Book is about a young boy whose family was killed, but he escapes the situation. And I say young boy, I mean like infant. But he escapes the home, doesn't even know what's happening upstairs. He escapes the home out the front door and wanders into a graveyard up a hill. And there he ends up being raised by the ghosts in the graveyard. So that is the whole premise of the story, that this boy is being raised by the ghosts in the graveyard, but the man who killed his parents and his sister is still looking for him. So it ends up still being really, really sweet, but it is a good read. And I will also include Murder on the Orient Express. Okay, now this poll is a 1-minute poll, so y'all hit it. Which spooky book? Welcome to Night Vale, The Graveyard Book, or Murder on the Orient Express? Steve, I'd rather have a nightmare than obsession with Undertale again. I guess that you did. I'm so sorry, my friend. I'm so sorry. I cannot believe I've done this to you. I'm so impressed by how many people are in the chat. Like, I really did not expect many viewers on this one, so I'm very, very pleased. I am going to steal Shiloh's flannel, though. I am cold. Looking like it's going to be the Graveyard Book, huh? Always is. Does this even fit me? I guess I'm going to find out, huh? There we go. Nice. The Graveyard Book won, y'all. Oh my god. Oh my god. I dropped Lavender. Lavender has been acquired. Okay. I cannot get this right. Okay. Best boy. Thank you, Mr. Memes. Trying to fix my goddamn sleeves. Okay. So, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Also, don't forget, you can also change the story. We're reading. I'm going to give it like every 15 minutes or so. And I am incredibly excited. So, I will start a list of what I change to every 15 minutes if you would like. So, this is what the front of the book looks like. In 5th grade, there we go. In 5th grade, I didn't know what these awards were, and I thought it was a sticker, like a sales sticker, stuck to the front of my book, so I tried to peel it up. And then I read the sticker and realized that I was not supposed to do that. I was like 10. Yeah, like 11 years later, this is still my favorite book. So, also, please redeem hydrate zones today, because I will be dehydrated. Alright, boys. The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Chapter 1. How Nobody Came to the Graveyard. There was a hand in the darkness, and it held a knife. The knife had a handle of polished black bone, and a blade finer and sharper than any razor. If it sliced you, you might not even know you had been cut. Not immediately. The knife had done almost everything it was brought to that house to do, and both the blade and the handle were wet. The street door was still open, just a little, where the knife and the man who held it had slipped in, and wisps of nighttime mist slithered and twined into the house through the open door. The man Jack paused on the landing. With his left hand, he pulled a large white handkerchief from the pocket of his black coat, and with it, he wiped off the knife and his gloved right hand, which he had been holding it. Gloved right hand, which had been holding it. Then he put the handkerchief away. The hunt was almost over. He left the woman in her bed, the man on the bedroom floor, the older child in her brightly colored bedroom surrounded by toys and half-finished models. That left only the little one, a baby barely a toddler, to take care of. One more, and his task would be done. He flexed his fingers. The man Jack was, above all things, a professional, or so he told himself, and he would not allow himself to smile until the job was completed. His hair was dark, and his gloves were dark, and he wore black leather gloves of the thinnest lambskin. The toddler's room was at the very top of the stairs. The man Jack walked up the stairs, his feet silent on the carpeting. Then he pushed open the attic door, and he walked in. His shoes were black leather, and they were polished to such a shine that they looked like dark mirrors. You could see the moon reflected in them, tiny and half full. The real moon shone through the casement window. Its light was not bright, and it was diffused by the mist, but the man Jack would not need much light. The moonlight was enough. It would do. He could make out the shape of the child in the crib, head and limbs and torso. The crib had high, slatted sides to prevent the child from getting out. Jack leaned over, raised his right hand, the one holding the knife, and he aimed for the chest. And then he lowered his hand. The shape of the crib was a teddy bear. There was no child. The man Jack's eyes were accustomed to the dim moonlight, so he had no desire to turn on an electric light. And light was not that important, after all. He had other skills. The man Jack sniffed the air. He ignored the scents that had come into the room with him, dismissed the scents that he could safely ignore, honed in on the smell of the thing he had come to find. He could smell the child. A milky smell like chocolate chip cookies and the sour tang of a wet, disposable nighttime diaper. He could smell the baby shampoo in its hair and something small and rubbery. A toy, he thought. Then, no, something to suck, that the child had been carrying. The child had been here. It was here no longer. The man Jack followed his nose down the stairs through the middle of the tall, thin house. He inspected the bathroom, the kitchen, the airing cupboard, and finally the downstairs hall, in which there was nothing to be seen but the family's bicycles, a pile of empty shopping bags, a fallen diaper, and the stray tendrils of fog that had insinuated themselves into the hall from the open door to the street. The man Jack made a small noise then, a grunt that contained in it both frustration and also satisfaction. He slipped the knife into its sheath in the inside pocket of his long coat, and he stepped out into the street. There was moonlight, and there were street lights, but the fog stifled everything, muted light and muffled sound, and made the night shadowy and treacherous. He looked down the hill towards the light of the closed shops and then up the street, where the last high houses wound up the hill on their way to the darkness of the old graveyard. The man Jack sniffed the air. Then, without hurrying, he began to walk up the hill. Thank you, Minky. I did up the volume a little bit, so let me know how it's going. Ever since the child had learned to walk, he had been his mother and his father's despair and delight, for there never was such a boy for wandering, for climbing up things, for getting into and out of things. That night, he had been woken by the sound of something on the floor beneath him falling with a crash. Awake, he soon became bored and had begun looking for a way out of his crib. It had high sides like the walls of his playpen downstairs, but he was convinced that he could scale it. All he needed was a step. He pulled his large golden teddy bear into the corner of his crib, and then, holding the railing in his tiny hands, he put his foot onto the bear's lap, the other foot up on the bear's head, and he pulled himself up into a standing position. And then he half climbed, half toppled over the railing, and out of the crib. He landed with a muffled thump on a small mound of furry, fuzzy toys, some of them presents from relations from his first birthday, not 6 months gone, some of them inherited from his older sister. He was surprised when he was surprised when he hit the floor, but he did not cry out. If you cried, they came and put you back in your crib. He crawled out of the room. Stairs that went up were tricky things, and he had not yet entirely mastered them. Stairs that went down, however, he discovered, were fairly simple. He did them sitting down, bumping from step to step to step on his well-padded bottom. He sucked on his number, the rubber pacifier his mother had just begun to tell him that he was getting too old for. His diaper had worked itself loose on his journey to his bottom downstairs, and when he reached the last step, when he reached the little hall and stood up, the diaper fell off. He stepped out of it, and he was only wearing a child's nightshirt. The stairs that led back up to his room and his family were steep, but the street was open and inviting. The child stepped out of the house a little hesitantly. The fog breathed around him like a long-lost friend, and then, uncertainly at first, then with increasing speed and confidence, the boy tottered up the hill. The fog was thinner as you approached the top of the hill. The half-moon shone, not as bright as day, not by any means, but enough to see the graveyard. Enough for that. Look. You could see the abandoned funeral chapel, iron doors padlocked, ivy on the sides of the spire, a small tree growing out of the guttering at roof level. You could see stones and tombs and vaults and memorial plaques. You could see the occasional dash or scuttle of a rabbit or a vole or a weasel as it slipped out of the undergrowth and across the path. You would have seen these things in the moonlight if you had been there that night. You might not have seen a pale, plump woman who walked near the path near the front gates, and if you had seen her with a second, more careful glance, you would have realized that she was only moonlight, mist, and shadow. The pale, plump woman was there, though. She walked the path that led, through a clutch of half-fallen tombstones towards the front gates. The gates were locked. They were always locked at 4 in the afternoon in winter, at 8 at night in the summer. Spike-topped iron railings ran around the part of the cemetery, a high brick wall around the rest of it. The bars at the gates were closely spaced. They would have stopped a grown man from getting through, even stopped a 10-year-old child. "Owens," called the pale woman in a voice that might have been the rustle of the wind through the long grass. "Owens, come and look at this." She crouched down and peered at something on the ground as a rough patch of shadow moved into the moonlight, revealing itself to be a grizzled man in his 40s. He looked down at his wife, and then looked at what she was looking at, and he scratched his head. "Mr. Owens," he said, for he came from a more formal age than our own. "Is that what I think it is?" At that moment, the thing he was inspecting seemed to catch sight of Mrs. Owens, for it opened its mouth, letting the rubber nipple it was sucking fall to the ground, and it reached out a small, chubby fist as if it were trying for all the world to hold on to Mrs. Owens' pale finger. "Strike me silly," said Mr. Owens, "if that isn't a baby." "Of course it's a baby," said his wife, "and the question is, what is to be done with it?" "I dare say that is a question, Mistress Owens," said her husband, "and yet it is not our question. For this here baby is unquestionably alive, and as such is nothing to do with us, and is no part of our world." "Look at him smile," said Mrs. Owens. "He has the sweetest of smiles." With one insubstantial hand, she stroked the child's sparse blonde hair. The little boy giggled with delight. "Thank you, Minky." A chilly breeze blew across the graveyard, scattering the fog in the lower slopes of the place, for the graveyard covered the whole top of the hill, and its paths wound up the hill and down and back upon themselves. A rattling. Someone at the main gate of the graveyard was pulling and shaking it, rattling the old gates and the heavy padlock and chain that held them. "There now," said Owens. "It's the babe's family. Leave the little man... Wait. It's the babe's family, come to bring him back to the loving bosom. Leave the little man be," he added, because Mrs. Owens was putting her insubstantial arms around the toddler, smoothing, stroking. Mrs. Owens said, "He doesn't look like nobody's family, that one." The man in the dark coat had given up on rattling the main gates and was now examining the smaller side gate. It, too, was well locked. There had been some vandalism in the graveyard the previous year, and the council had taken steps. "Come on, Mistress Owens, leave it be, there's a dear," said Mr. Owens when he saw a ghost, and his mouth dropped open, and he found himself unable to think of anything to say. You might think, and if you did, you would be right, that Mr. Owens should not have taken on so at seeing a ghost, given that Mr. and Mrs. Owens themselves were dead, and had been for a few hundred years now, and given that the entirety of their social life, or very nearly, was spent with those who were also dead. But this was a difference between the folks of the graveyard and this, a raw, flickering, startled shape, the gray color of television static, all panic and naked emotion, which flooded the Owenses as if it was their own. 3 figures, 2 large, 1 smaller, but only one of them was in focus, was more than an outline or a shimmer. And the figure said, "My baby! He is trying to harm my baby!" A clattering. The man outside was hauling a heavy metal garbage can across the alley to the high brick wall that ran around that part of the graveyard. "Protect my son," said the ghost, and Mrs. Owens thought it was a woman. Of course, the babe's mother. "What did he do to you?" said Mrs. Owens, but she was not certain that the ghost could hear her. Recently dead, poor love, she thought. It's always easier to die gently, to wake up in due time in the place you were buried, to come to terms with your death, and to get acquainted with the other inhabitants. This creature was nothing but alarm and fear for her child, and her panic, which felt to the Owenses like a low-pitched screaming, was now attracting attention, for other pale figures were coming from all over the graveyard. Yes. Bees is correct. Ghost people, living baby. Hey, Red. I really, really like that username. That is great. Red has redeemed.
Please, sir. Any spare subs? Any at all. Thank you very much, sir.
Did somebody do a sub? Yes, Red did. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Red, for redeeming your sub. I appreciate it super, super... very... Oh my god, I'm gonna have a stroke. I'm at the point where I can read, but I can't talk. No, Mrs. Owens is not the Grim Reaper. She just happens to be a ghost who the baby's mother's ghost came to. She's asking Mrs. Owens for help, basically, in, like, protecting her son. But, Red, if you would like to change the story we're reading in about 5 minutes, because you extended your sub, you can do so if you choose. Though I am quite invested in this one, so it is up to you. Just make sure to highlight your message and let me know. Where was I? The creature was nothing but alarm and fear for her child, which was now attracting attention, for other pale figures were coming from all over the graveyard. Who are you? Caius Pompeius asked the figure. His headstone was now only a weathered lump of rock, but 2,000 years earlier he had asked to be laid to rest on the mound beside the marble shrine, rather than to have his body sent back to Rome. And he was one of the most senior citizens of the graveyard. He took his responsibilities extremely seriously. Are you buried here? Of course she's not. Freshly dead by the look of her. Mrs. Owens put an arm around the woman's shake and spoke to it privately, in a low voice, calm and sensible. There was a thump and a crash from the high wall beside the alley. The garbage can had fallen. A man clambered up on top of the wall, a dark outline against the mist-smudged streetlights. He paused for a moment, then climbed down the other side, holding on to the top of the wall, legs dangling, and then let himself fall the last few feet down into the graveyard. But my dear, Mrs. Owens said to the shape, now all that was left of the 3 shapes that had appeared in the graveyard, he's living. We're not. Can you imagine? The child was looking up at them, puzzled. It reached for one of them and the other, finding nothing but air. The woman shape, his mother, was fading fast. Yes, said Mrs. Owens, in response to something that no one else had heard. If we can, then we will. Then she turned to the man beside her. And you, Owens? Will you be a father to this little lad? Will I what? Said Owens, his brow crinkling. We never had a child, said his wife, and his mother wants us to protect him. Will you say yes? The man in the black coat had tripped in the tangle of ivy and half-broken headstones. Now he got to his feet and walked forward more carefully, startling an owl which rose on silent wings. He could see the baby, and there was triumph in his eyes. Owens knew what his wife was thinking when she used that tone of voice. They had not, in life and in death, been married for over 250 years for nothing. Are you certain? He asked. Are you sure? Sure as I've ever been of anything, said Mrs. Owens. Then yes. If you'll be its mother, I'll be its father. Did you hear that? Mrs. Owens asked the flickering shape in the graveyard, now little more than an outline, like distant summer lightning in the shape of a woman. It said something to her that no one else could hear, and then it was gone. She'll not come here again, said Mr. Owens. Next time she wakes, it'll be in her own graveyard, or wherever it is she's going. Mrs. Owens bent down to the baby and extended her arms. Come now, she said. Come to Mama. To the man Jack, walking through the graveyard towards them on a path, his knife already in his hand, it seemed as if a swirl of mist curled around the child in the moonlight, and that the boy was no longer there. Just damp mist and moonlight and swaying grass. He blinked and sniffed the air. Something had happened, but he had no idea what it was. He growled in the back of his throat like a beast of prey, angry and frustrated. "Hello?" called the man Jack, wondering if perhaps the child had stepped behind something. His voice was dark and rough, and there was an odd edge to it, as if of surprise or puzzlement at hearing himself speak. The graveyard kept its secrets. "Hello?" he called again. He hoped to hear a baby cry or utter a half word or to hear it move. He did not expect what he actually heard. A voice, silky smooth, saying, "Can I help you?" The man Jack was tall. This man was taller. The man Jack wore dark clothes. This man's clothes were darker. People who noticed the man Jack when he was about in his business, and he did not like to be noticed, were troubled or made uncomfortable or found themselves unaccountably scared. The man Jack looked up at the stranger,
Stevie reads to us.
and it was the man
Father.
Jack who was troubled. Thank you, Oak. Thank you, Red. "I was looking for someone," said the man Jack, slipping his right hand back into his coat pocket, so the knife was hidden, but there if he needed it. "In a locked graveyard? At night?" said the stranger. "It was just a baby," said the man Jack. "I was passing when I heard a baby cry, and I looked through the gates and I saw him. Well, what would anyone do?" "I applaud your public spiritedness," said the stranger. "Yet if you managed to find this child, how were you planning to get out of here with it? You can't climb back over the wall holding a baby." Jack is the murderer. Jack murdered the baby's family and wants to kill the baby. "I would have called until someone let me out," said the man Jack. A heavy jingling of keys. "Well, that would have been me then," said the stranger. "I would have had to let you out." He selected one large key from the key ring and said, "Follow me." The man Jack walked behind the stranger. He took his knife from his pocket. "Are you the caretaker, then?" "Am I?" Certainly. In a manner of speaking," said the stranger. They were walking towards the gates, and the man, Jack was certain, away from baby. The man Jack was certain, away from the baby. But the caretaker had the keys. A knife in the dark, that was all it would take, and then he could search for the child all through the night if he needed to. He raised the knife. "If there was a baby," said the stranger, without looking back, "it wouldn't have been here in the graveyard. Perhaps you were mistaken. It's unlikely that a child would have come in here after all. Much more likely that you heard a night bird and saw a cat, perhaps, or a fox. They declared this place an official nature reserve, 30 years ago, around the time of the last funeral. Now think carefully and tell me you are certain it was a child that you saw." The man Jack thought. The stranger unlocked the side gate. "A fox," he said. "They make the most uncommon noises, not unlike a person crying. No, your visit to this graveyard was a misstep, sir. Somewhere the child you seek awaits you, but he is not here." And he let the thought sit there in the man Jack's head for a moment before he opened the gate with a flourish. "Delighted to have made your acquaintance," he said, "and I trust you will find everything you need out there." The man Jack stood outside the gates to the graveyard. The stranger stood inside the gate, and he locked it again and put the key away. "Where are you going?" said the man Jack. "There are other gates than this," said the stranger. "My car is on the other side of the hill. Don't mind me. You don't even have to remember this conversation." "No," said the man Jack, agreeably. "I don't." He remembered wandering up the hill, that what he had thought to be a child had turned out to be a fox, that a helpful caretaker had escorted him back out to the street. He slipped his knife into its inner sheath. "Well," he said, "good night." "A good night to you," said the stranger, whom Jack had taken for a caretaker. The man Jack set off down the hill in pursuit of the infant. From the shadows, the stranger watched Jack until he was out of sight. Then he moved through the night, up and up to the flat place below the brow of the hill, a place dominated by an obelisk and a flat stone set into the ground dedicated to the memory of Josiah Worthington, local brewer, politician, and later baronet, who had, almost 300 years before, bought the old cemetery and the land around it, and given it to the city in perpetuity. He had reserved for himself the best location on the hill, a natural amphitheater with a view of the whole city and beyond, and had ensured the graveyard endured as a graveyard for which the inhabitants of the graveyard were grateful, although never quite as grateful as Josiah Worthington Bart felt they should have been. Boy. Jack, why are you being bullied? What happened? Oh, I see. Well, Jack, did you try to kill a child? If not, you're good. There were, all told, some 10,000 souls in the graveyard, but most of them slept deep or took no interest in the night-to-night affairs of the place, and there were less than 300 of them up there in the amphitheater in the moonlight. The stranger reached them as silently as the fog itself, and he watched the proceedings unfold from the shadows, and he said nothing. Josiah Worthington was speaking. He said, "My dear madam, your obduracy is quite... Well, can't you see how ridiculous this is?" "No," said Mrs. Owens, "I can't." She was sitting, cross-legged, on the ground, and the living child was sleeping in her lap. She cradled its head with her pale hands. "What Mistress Owens is trying to say, sir, begging your honor's pardon," said Mr. Owens, standing beside her, "is that she don't see it that way. She sees it as doing her duty." Mr. Owens had seen Josiah Worthington in the flesh back when they were both alive, had in fact made several fine pieces of furniture for the Worthington Manor house out near Inglesham, and was still in awe of him. "Her duty?" Josiah Worthington Bartholomew shook his head as if to dislodge a strand of cobweb. "Your duty, ma'am, is to the graveyard, and to the commonalty of those who form this population of discarnate spirits, revenants, and such like wights, and your duty, thus, is to return the creature as soon as possible to its natural home, which is not here. His mamma gave the boy to me," said Mrs. Owens, as if that was all that needed to be said. "My dear woman—" "I am not your dear woman," said Mrs. Owens, getting to her feet. "Truth to tell, I don't even see why I am here, talking to you fiddle-pated old dunderheads, when this lad is going to wake up hungry soon. And where am I going to find food for him in this graveyard, I should like to know?" "Which," said Caius Pompeius stiffly, "is precisely the point. What will you feed him? How can you care for him?" Mrs. Owens' eyes burned. "I can look after him," she said, "as well as his own mamma. She already gave him to me. Look, I'm holding him, aren't I? I'm touching him." "Now see reason, Betsy," said Mother Slaughter, a tiny old thing, in the huge bonnet and cape that she had worn in life and had been buried wearing. "Where would he live?" "Here," said Mrs. Owens. "We could give him the freedom of the graveyard." Mother Slaughter's mouth became a tiny O. "But," she said. Then she said, "But I never." "Well, why not? And at the first time we'd have given the freedom of the graveyard to an outsider." "That is true," said Caius Pompeius, "but he wasn't alive." And with that, the stranger realized that he was being drawn, like it or not, into the conversation, and reluctantly, he stepped out of the shadows, detaching from them like a patch of darkness. "No," he agreed, "I am not. But I take Mrs. Owens' point." Josiah Worthington said, "You do, Silas." "I do. For good or for evil, and I firmly believe that it is for good, Mrs. Owens and her husband have taken this child under their protection. It is going to take more than just a couple of good-hearted souls to raise this child. It will," said Silas, "take a graveyard." "And what of food, and the rest of it?" "I can leave the graveyard and return. I can bring him food." "That's all very well you saying that," said Mother Slaughter, "but you comes and you goes, and nobody keeps track of you. If you went off for a week, the boy could die." "You're a wise woman," said Silas. "I see why they speak so highly of you." He couldn't push the minds of the dead as he could the living, but he used all the tools of flattery and persuasion he possessed, for the dead are not immune to either. Then he came to a decision. "Very well. If Mr. and Mrs. Owens will be his parents, I shall be his guardian. I shall remain here, and if I need to leave, I shall ensure that someone takes my place, bringing the child food and looking after him. We can use the crypt of the chapel," he added. "But," expostulated Josiah Worthington, "but a human child, a living child, I mean. This is a graveyard, not a nursery, blast it." "Exactly," said Silas, nodding. "A very good point, Sir Josiah. I couldn't have put it better myself. and for that reason, if no other, it is vital that the child be raised with as little disruption as possible to the, if you'll forgive the expression, the life of the graveyard. With that, he strolled over to Mrs. Owens, and he looked down at the infant asleep in her arms. He raised an eyebrow. "Does he have a name, Mrs. Owens?" "Not that his mother told me," she said. "Well then, his own name won't be of much use to him now, anyway. There are those out there who mean him harm. Suppose we pick a name for him, eh?" Caius Pompeius slipped over and eyed the child. "He looks a little like my proconsul, Marcus. We should call him Marcus." Josiah Worthington said. "He looks more like my head gardener, Stebbins. Not that I'm suggesting Stebbins as a name. The man drank like a fish." "He looks like my nephew Harry," said Mother Slaughter, and it seemed then as if the whole graveyard was about to join in, each inhabitant offering his or her own comparisons between the infant and someone long forgotten, when Mrs. Owens broke in. "He looks like nobody but himself," said Mrs. Owens. "He looks like nobody." "Then nobody it is," said Silas. "Nobody Owens." It was then that, as if responding to the name, the child opened its eyes wide in wakefulness. It stared around it, taking in the faces of the dead, and the mist, and the moon. Then it looked at Silas. Its gaze did not flinch. It looked grave. "And what kind of a name is Nobody?" asked Mother Slaughter, scandalized. "His name. And a good name," Silas told her. "It will help to keep him safe." "I don't want trouble," said Josiah Worthington. The infant looked up at him, and then, hungry or tired or simply missing his home, his family, his world, he screwed up his tiny face and began to cry. "Leave us," said Caius Pompeius to Mrs. Owens. "We will discuss this further without you." Mrs. Owens waited outside the funeral chapel. It had been decreed over 40 years before that building, in appearance a small church with a spire, was listed a building of historical interest. The town council had decided that it would cost too much to renovate it, a little chapel in an overgrown graveyard that had become already unfashionable, so they'd padlocked it and waited for it to fall down. Ivy covered it, but it was solidly built, and it would not fall down this century. The child had fallen asleep in Mrs. Owens' arms. She rocked it gently, sang to it an old song, one her mother had sung to her when she was a baby herself, back in the old days, when men had first started to wear powdered wigs. The song went, "Sleep, my little baby-o, sleep until you waken. When you're grown you'll see the world, if I'm not mistaken. Kiss a lover, dance a measure, find your name in buried treasure." And Mrs. Owens sang all that before she discovered that she had forgotten how the song ended. She had a feeling that the final line was something in the way of "and some hairy bacon," but that might have been another song altogether. So she stopped, and instead sang him the one about the man in the moon who came down too soon, and after that she sang in her warm country voice a more recent song about a lad who put in his thumb and pulled out a plum, and she had just started a long ballad about a young country gentleman whose girlfriend had, for no particular reason, poisoned him with a dish of spotted eels, when Silas came around the side of the chapel carrying a cardboard box. "Here we go, Mr. Owens," he said. "Lots of good things for a growing boy. We can keep it in the crypt, eh?" The padlock fell off in his hand, and he pulled open the iron door. Mrs. Owens walked inside, looking dubiously at the other shelves, and at the old wooden pews tipped up against a wall. There were mildewed boxes of old parish records in one corner, and an open door that revealed a Victorian flush toilet and a basin, with only a cold tap in the other. The infant opened his eyes and stared. "We can put the food in here," said Silas. "It's cool, and the food will keep longer." He reached into the box, pulled out a banana. "And what would that be when it was at home?" asked Mrs. Owens, eyeing the yellow and brown object suspiciously. "It's a banana, a fruit from the tropics. I believe you peel off the outer covering," said Silas, "like so." The child, Nobody, wriggled in Mrs. Owens' arms, and she let it down to the flagstones. It toddled rapidly to Silas, grasped his trouser leg, and held on. Silas passed it the banana. Mrs. Owens watched the boy eat. "Banana," she said dubiously. "Never heard of them. Never. What's it taste like?" "I've absolutely no idea," said Silas, who consumed only one food, and it was not bananas. "You could make up a bed in here for the boy, you know." "I'll do no such thing, with Owens and me having a lovely little tomb over by the daffodil patch. Plenty of room in there for a little one. Anyway," she added, concerned that Silas might think she was rejecting his hospitality, "I wouldn't want the lad disturbing you." "He wouldn't." The boy was done with his banana. What he had not eaten was now smeared all over himself. He beamed, messy and apple-cheeked. "Narna," he said, happily. "What a clever little thing he is," said Mrs. Owens. "And such a mess he's made. Why, attend, you little wriggler." And she picked the lumps of banana from his clothes and his hair. And then, what do you think they'll decide? I don't know. I can't give him up. Not after what I promised his mama. "Although I have been a great many things in my time," said Silas, "I have never been a mother, and I do not plan to begin now. But I can leave this place." Mrs. Owens said simply, "I cannot. My bones are here, and so is Owens. I'm never leaving." "It must be good," said Silas, "to have somewhere that you belong. Somewhere that's home." There was nothing wistful in the way he said this. His voice was drier than the desert's, and he said it as if he was simply stating something unarguable. Mrs. Owens did not argue. "Do you think we'll have long to wait?" "Not long," said Silas, but he was wrong about that. Up in the amphitheater on the side of the hill, the debate continued. That it was the Owenses who had got involved in this nonsense rather than some flibber-to-gibbet Johnny-come-latelys counted for a lot, for the Owenses were respectable and respected. That Silas had volunteered to be the boy's guardian had weight. Silas was regarded with a certain wary awe by the graveyard folk, existing as he did on the borderland between their world and the world they had left. But still, a graveyard is not normally a democracy, and yet death is the great democracy, and each of the dead had a voice and an opinion as to whether the living child should be allowed to stay, and they were each determined to be heard that night. It was late autumn when the daybreak was long in coming. Although the sky was still dark, cars could now be heard starting up further down the hill as the living folk began to drive to work through the misty night-black morning. The graveyard folk talked about the child that had come to them and what was to be done. 300 voices, 300 opinions. Nehemiah Trott, the poet from the tumbled northwestern side of the graveyard, had begun to declaim his thoughts on the matter, although what they were no person listening could have said, when something happened. Something to silence each opinionated mouth, something unprecedented in the history of that graveyard. A huge white horse, of the kind that the people who know horses would call a gray, came ambling up the side of the hill. The pounding of its hooves could be heard before it was seen, along with the crashing it made as it pushed through the little bushes and thickets, through the brambles and the ivy and the gorse that had grown up on the side of the hill. The size of a shire horse it was, a full 19 hands or more. It was a horse that could have carried a knight in full armor into combat, but all it carried on its naked back was a woman, clothed from head to foot in gray. Her long skirt and her shawl might have been spun out of old cobwebs. Her face was serene and peaceful. They knew her, the graveyard folk, for each of us encounters the lady on the gray at the end of our days, and there is no forgetting her. The horse paused beside the obelisk. In the east, the sky was lightening gently, a pearlish pre-dawn luminescence that made the people of the graveyard uncomfortable and made them think about returning to their comfortable homes. Even so, not one of them moved. They were watching the lady on the gray, each of them half excited, half scared. The deaf are not superstitious, not as a rule, but they watched her as a Roman augur might have watched the sacred crow's circle, seeking wisdom, seeking a clue. And she spoke to them. In a voice like the chiming of 100 tiny silver bells, she said only, "The dead should have charity." And she smiled. The horse, which had been contentedly ripping up and masticating a clump of thick grass, stopped then. The lady touched the horse's neck, and it turned. It took several huge, clattering steps, then it was off the side of the hill and cantering across the sky. Its thunderous hooves became an early rumble of distant thunder, and in moments it was lost to sight. That, at least, was what the folks of the graveyard who had been on the hillside that night claimed had happened. The debate was over and ended, and without so much as a show of hands, had been decided. The child called Nobody Owens would be given the freedom of the graveyard. Mother Slaughter and Josiah Worthington Bart accompanied Mr. Owens to the crypt of the old chapel, and they told Mrs. Owens the news. She seemed unsurprised by the miracle. "That's right," she said. Some of them don't have a ha'porth of sense in their heads, but she does. Of course she does. Before the sun rose on a thundering gray morning, the child was fast asleep in the Owens' fine little tune, for Master Owens had died at the prosperous head of the local cabinet makers guild, and the cabinet makers had wanted to ensure that he was properly honored. Silas went out for one final journey before the sunrise. He found the tall house on the side of the hill, and he examined the 3 bodies he found there, and he studied the pattern of the knife wounds. When he was satisfied, he stepped out into the morning's dark, his head churning with unpleasant possibilities, and he returned to the graveyard, to the chapel spire where he slept and waited out the days. In the little town at the bottom of the hill, the man Jack was getting increasingly angry. The night had been one that he had been looking forward to for so long, the culmination of months, of years of work. And the business of the evening had started so promisingly. 3 people down before any of them had even had a chance to cry out, and then it had all gone so maddeningly wrong. Why on earth had he gone up the hill when the child had so obviously gone down the hill? By the time he'd reached the bottom of the hill, the trail had gone cold. Someone must have found the child, taken it in, hidden it. There was no other explanation. A crack of thunder rang out loud and sudden as a gunshot, and the rain began in earnest. The man Jack was methodical, and he began to plan his next move. The calls he would need to pay on certain of the townsfolk, people who would be his eyes and ears in the town. He did not need to tell the convocation that he failed. Anyway, he told himself, edging under a shop front as the morning rain came down like tears, he had not failed. Not yet. Not for years to come. There was plenty of time. Time to tie up this last piece of unfinished business. Time to cut the final thread. It was not until the police siren sounded, and first a police car, then an ambulance, then an unmarked police car with a siren blaring sped past him on their way up the hill that, reluctantly, the man Jack turned up the collar of his coat, put his head down, and walked off into the morning. His knife was in his pocket, safe and dry inside its sheath, protected from the misery of the elements. So that is the end of chapter 1. That took me like half an hour to read. That's pretty good. Inkling, I am so sorry you had to deal with a very unpleasant trailer. Hopefully, this book will calm you down a little bit. We got past the murdery part of it in the beginning. I'm gonna make a little poll asking if you're asleep. I just want to see if I've actually helped anyone get sleepy so far. Ooh. I'm glad you're eating your watermelon gummy sharks, Bard. Who the fuck was awake to click yeah? Fuck off. Ooh, it's a little chilly in here. I feel very peaceful. Phantom, thank you so much. Oh my god, because now they won't get ads. Phantom, that is so sweet. That's so fucking sweet. Are you kidding me? Oh, that was adorable. Oh, that just reminded me. Phantom, if you would like to change the story we're reading, we can read a chapter of something else, since a sub will get you that. So if you would like to pick the next story, you absolutely can. But if you are quite invested in the Graveyard book, we can continue that. Is that Shiloh? That's Shiloh. Come here, Bubba. Hi, Bug.
Hi.
It's Shiloh.
Hi.
Hi, sweet boy.
Hi.
You're very warm. This is nice. I'm wearing your flannel because I got cold.
Oh, it looks really cute on you.
It is very cute.
I'm obsessed with that. Hi.
Yeah. Are you watching the stream or just popping in? Excuse you.
Sorry, just popping in.
Oh, the lighting got all bright because the perspective shift. Hold on. Oh, there we go. There we go. We're okay. Just read the first chapter of the Graveyard Book, and it's really fun to read.
What a good book. I still need to finish
It's
that.
so good.
Oh, you're
Jack
so
says
cute.
hi.
Hi.
Yeah. Oh, Red says, Shiloh, hi, I love the color of your hair. Isn't it so nice?
Thank
Like, come
you.
on. Just
Hi.
lovely. Replace Stevie with Shiloh 2K21. Fuck you, Minky. Fuck you. Also, Minky, I didn't get to say much about it earlier, but thank you for timing out the annoying person in chat earlier. They were like spamming, trying to get my attention. I was like, bitch, I am literally reading a novel.
That's so funny.
Do you think I can read both at once? Fuck you.
I'm so sorry.
So
That
Minky
is
timed
kind
them out, and I think they left. So
That's irritating. I'm sorry.
it was whatever.
I'll see if you need any more water or anything.
Thank you, Papa. Yeah, they really wanted to be banned. Like, they literally just, like, came in spamming and asking to be banned. And they were like, Ma, do your job. Shut the fuck up.
That's so fucking weird.
This is a chill stream, my guy.
Right, like,
Calm
get
the
over
fuck down.
yourself. I'm
I didn't do it
sorry.
because I'm not giving them what they want. Minky,
Period.
your mind.
Period.
Love your mind. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Phantom, I didn't see if you said anything, but again, if you do want to change, you said you're content. Okay, good. Okay, so we will continue with the Graveyard Book. If y'all want, I will put up a new poll. Right when I come back from break. I am going to go to the bathroom because I have been chugging water. But Lavender will keep the book safe in the meantime. So,
Period.
y'all, just vibe with the lo-fi. I will be back in just a few minutes to continue the Graveyard Book if you want. Alright, boys. We're back. Boy. There we go. This is extremely cute. I love what I'm watching happen in chat. I also realized that I accidentally did something very smart as far as, oh, I accidentally bought my volume button. As far as doing a stream where people are supposed to fall asleep, is it ends up kind of being built-in viewership, because if they're not awake, they can't close the tab. They can't shut the stream off. And I promise that was not intentional in that regard, but... Oh my god. Congratulations, Phantom. That sounds wonderful. Oh shit, I was dehydrated. You better keep redeeming Hydrate Zone. Stevie cheating the system. You missed so much. Phantom's getting married. That's exciting. To who? Inkling? Okay, word. Phantom, you consent to this marriage? Hey, sweet cake. It looks like Phantom gifted, fucking, Inkling a sub so they wouldn't have to watch scary movie ads, which was incredibly sweet. And now they're getting married? That's as good as a proposal. Well, I think that's just thrilling. I did just realize I probably could do to, make my alerts a little quieter. Because I don't want to wake anybody up. Don't want to scare anyone. Although I don't really remember how to edit that. Ooh. Weird. Anyway, yeah, so Ink proposed. Great. Okay. Also, can y'all hear the music? I'll get back to reading the book in a second, by the way. Don't even worry. They did it in chat. Very romantic. 10 out of 10. Let me know if you can't hear the music, okay? Stevie not knowing tech. Wow, listen. That's a staple of my streams at this point. Come on. Can't hear music. What the fuck happened there? You hear it now? Okay, it's pretty low because it gets a little tricky. Thank you, Bubba. Everyone say hi, Shiloh. Everyone say thank you, Shiloh, for bringing Stevie a drink. I love you.
Oh, that's sweet.
We said it at the same time.
We did.
That was really cute.
Oh, that's really cute. Oh, baby.
I'm just gonna stay here now. No more stream. Only hold Shiloh.
Good night, I guess.
Love you.
Love you too. Have a good rest of your stream.
Sorry, I bit off your finger.
Oh, hell.
It's gone.
What the hell am I about to do now?
Thank you for the drink.
You're welcome. I don't mind. Let me know if you need anything else.
I will. I love you.
Love you too.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye. Stevie's just fighting God and barely winning at this rate, so I may just do everything and it works somehow. Honestly, I'm just seeing like how many places I can like sneak into, and they keep letting me. It's comical. I had the TikTok Stevie made where Shiloh fell asleep on their arm. That literally happened this afternoon too. No more stream, only hold Shiloh. Oh man, I should have had somebody clip that. Where we said I love you at the same time. It was so cute. Jack started class. Fuck yeah, dude. That is exciting. I'm entering my senior year of college. My heart is warmed and my crops watered. Truly. Y'all, if you don't follow City Girl on Spotify, you should. That's some good fucking lo-fi. I dropped out of college, oh my dab. Good for you, Minky. Honestly, sometimes that's on self-care. You gotta do what's best for you. Okay. So I'm starting chapter 2. Titled The New Friend. My major at the moment is humanities, actually. And I was considering getting a master's in library science for a while. If you're not a Spotify, I think City Girl does also have a YouTube. No, they definitely have a YouTube as well. Really pretty art. I was considering getting a master's in library science and becoming a librarian. Now, as like my internet presence is kind of growing, I am starting to kind of reconsider that because I really don't have a lot of passion surrounding librarianship, even though I know that it is pretty stable at this point. Like, that is a market that's growing because the previous sort of generation of librarians is like aging and retiring, and making way for a new group. And I think that's great. And I think that sort of working for freedom of information and keeping that available to people would be great. But I just don't really know if that's my passion, because honestly it's not. I just kind of always wanted to figure out what I could do that I wouldn't, like, what career will I not hate? Because the careers I was passionate about growing up were like performing arts and like acting and music and writing, like creative writing, like creativity. But it's a little bit hard now to actually make a living doing that. So I kind of gave up on that. And so I was like, well, I need to find something that I will at least like not hate. You know what I mean? No, you're right, Jack. And it's hard, like, having to consider sort of at this point of like late stage capitalism, like, what can I do that like won't kill me? And that sucks. Like, that really sucks, because like I was like, I think I could at least be content being a librarian. And honestly, I think I'm right. I think I probably still could be, but I just don't know that it's for me. So that's why I'm kind of working on this shit and working on growing my presence here and on YouTube. I just hired an editor, and I'm extremely excited to start getting more stuff going up on YouTube and the podcast, and I'm excited to see how that pans out. So yeah, and the job I'm in right now, the corporate job, like the call center, is stable. I really don't have any passion for it, but it's incredibly stable and it does pay well, especially for this stage of life. So I mean, it is what it is. Me wanting to be mortuary tech, well, if it kills you, I have work. I always admire people who go into mortuary work. I've always wondered sort of what draws them to that. I think that's fascinating. Thank you, Oak. I appreciate you immensely. I do. But I digress. I am very glad to be here tonight. I'm feeling extremely chill, extremely happy. I always love streaming. I always do. I really should up the number of days I stream a week. Would y'all watch? Would y'all watch if I up the number of days I stream a week? Paramedic EMT. That is a respectable career, truly. What, Minky? Next chapter of Graveyard. I can't spell. If you're looking for more stream ideas, your mods and Jackbox are right here. You're right. That is true. I do fucking love doing Jackbox with y'all. It is so fun. I miss doing that. I haven't done that in a while. Okay. Thank you, Red. I appreciate you guys so much. I do. Ooh. And the subs. You're right, Mink. Okay. So you guys vote. Vote. In that poll so we can see what you want. Okay, it's looking like Graveyard Book might be the consensus. And I know that some people are asleep. I'm guessing like about 20 at this point might be asleep, which is cute. So, yeah, it's looking like that one's gonna win. Cheers. Okay, So for those who were not here for the first chapter or missed some, this is a book about a boy named Nobody whose parents and sister were murdered, and the murderer is trying to come after him too. So he escapes. He's very little. He was like an infant when he came. Doesn't remember it. He escapes to the graveyard where some ghosts adopt him, Mr. and Mrs. Owens. Okay, so chapter 2 of the Graveyard Book. Really unanimous consensus. Yes, we absolutely can do Jackbox. That'd be so fun. So these ghosts take him in as his parents, and he also has a caretaker named Silas. I don't know how many things you picked up about Silas so far. It took me 4 years of reading the book before I realized what Silas was, because there are constant hints about him being between the world of the living and the dead and only eating one food, and it's not bananas, and he is able to, like, he has the power to, like, persuade humans, and you know what that means. I didn't at the time when I read it. I had no idea. So very, very fun to sort of know that and see how that's like incorporated. So it's not just the living and the dead. Other supernatural things do exist in this universe. Minky, vampires. He's a vampire. He's got all the powers, man. Literally a vampire. Yes. Yes, he is. Yeah, anyway, now I simp for Silas the vampire. I was playing the crab, boo. Will, I cannot even complain. I'm about to start chapter 2 of the Graveyard Book. Super excited. But yes, he is named Nobody Owens because his mother said that he looks like nobody but himself. So, I'm very, very excited. Oh, this chapter always made me so sad. I loved it. I mean, like, not sad. It was like a lot of wonder, but also sadness. You'll see. Oh, he gave Nobody a banana, and the mom asked what it tastes like, and he said he doesn't know because he only eats one food, and it is not bananas. All right. I think so. Listen, she's super sweet. She's a great mom. She's described as, like, plump and pleasant. She's very kind-hearted. Okay. One more sip of water, and then we're gonna go. Okay. Chapter 2. The New Friend. Bod was a quiet child with sober gray eyes and a mop of tousled mouse-colored hair. He was, for the most part, obedient. He learned how to talk, and once he had learned, he would pester the graveyard folk with questions. "Why am I allowed out of the graveyard?" he would ask. Or, "How do I do what he just did?" Or, "Who lives in here?" Excuse me. The adults would do their best to answer his questions, but their answers were often vague or confusing or contradictory, and then Bod would walk down to the old chapel and talk to Silas. Jack, Mr. Owens, is very lanky and tall. He was a woodworker, so he's very strong and his hands are very rough, so do with that what you will. Silas would be waiting there. Bod would be waiting there at sunset, just before Silas awakened. His guardian could always be counted upon to explain matters clearly and lucidly and as simple as Bod needed in order to understand. You aren't allowed out of the graveyard. It's aren't, by the way, not amped, not these days, because it's only in the graveyard that we can keep you safe. This is where you live, and this is where those who love you can be found. Outside would not be safe for you. Not yet. You go outside. You go outside every night. I am infinitely older than you, lad, and I'm safe wherever I am. I'm safe there too. I wish that were true, but as long as you stay here, you are safe. Or, wait. Oh, I'm wrong. Okay. Or, how could you do that? Some skills can be attained by education and some practice, and some by time. Those skills will come if you study. Soon enough, you will master fading and sliding and dream walking. But some skills cannot be mastered by the living, and for those you must wait a little longer. Still, I do not doubt that you will acquire even those in time. You were given the freedom of the graveyard, after all, Silas would tell him, so the graveyard is taking care of you. While you're here, you could see in the darkness. You can walk some of the ways that the living should not travel. The eyes of the living will slip from you. I too was given the freedom of the graveyard, although in my case it comes with nothing but the right of abode. I want to be like you, said Bod, pushing out his lower lip. No, said Silas firmly. You do not. Or, who lies there? You know, Bod, in many cases it is written on the stone. Can you read yet? Do you know your alphabet? My what? Silas shook his head, but said nothing. Mr. and Mrs. Owens had never been much for reading when they were alive, and there were no alphabet books in the graveyard. The next night, Silas appeared at the front of the Owens' cozy tomb carrying 3 large books, 2 of them brightly colored alphabet books. A is for apple, B is for ball, and a copy of The Cat in the Hat. He also had paper and a packet of wax crayons. Then he walked Bod around the graveyard, placing the boy's small fingers on the newest and clearest of the headstones and the plaques, and taught Bod how to find the letters of the alphabet when they appeared, beginning with the sharp steeple of the capital A. Silas gave Bod a quest, to find each of the 26 letters in the graveyard, and Bod finished it proudly with the discovery of Ezekiel Olmsley's stone built into the side of the wall in the old chapel. His guardian was pleased with him. Every day, Bod would take his paper and crayons into the graveyard. I keep losing my spot. And he would copy names and words and numbers as best as he could, and each night, before Silas would go off into the world, Bod would make Silas explain to him what he had written, and make him translate the snatches of Latin which had, for the most part, baffled the Owenses. A sunny day. Bumblebees explored the wildflowers that grew in the corner of the graveyard, dangling from the gorse and the bluebells, droning their deep, lazy buzz, while Bod lay in the spring sunlight, watching a bronze-colored beetle wandering across the stone of George Reader, his wife, Dorcas, and their son, Sebastian, Fidelis ad mortem. Bod had copied down their inscription, and now he was only thinking about the beetle when somebody said, "Boy, what are you doing?" Bod looked up. There was someone on the other side of the gorse bush, watching him. "Nothing," said Bod. He stuck out his tongue. The face on the other side of the gorse bush crumpled into a gargoyle, tongue sticking out, eyes popping, and then returned to a girl. "That was good," said Bod, impressed. "I can make really good faces," said the girl. "Look at this one." She pushed her nose up with one finger, creased her mouth into a huge, satisfied smile, squinted her eyes, puffed out her cheeks. "Do you know what that was?" "No." "It was a pig, silly." "Oh," Bod thought. "You mean like P is for pig?" "Of course like that. Hang on." She came around the gorse bush and stood next to Bod, who got to his feet. She was a little older than he was, a little taller, and was dressed in bright colors, yellow and pink and orange. Bod, in his gray winding sheet, felt dowdy and drab. "How old are you?" said the girl. "What are you doing here? Do you live here? What's your name?" "I don't know," said Bod. "You don't know your name?" said the girl. "Of course you do. Everybody knows their name." "Fibber." I know my name," said Bod, "and I know what I'm doing here, but I don't know the other thing you said." "How old you are?" Bod nodded. "Well," said the girl, "what was you when you had your last birthday?" "I didn't," said Bod. "I never was." "Everybody gets birthdays. You mean you never had cake or candles or stuff?" Bod shook his head. The girl looked sympathetic. "Poor thing. I'm 5. I bet you're 5 too." Bod nodded enthusiastically. He was not going to argue with his new friend. She made him happy. Her name was Scarlet Amber Perkins, she told him, and she lived in a flat with no garden. Her mother was sitting on a bench by the chapel at the bottom of the hill, reading a magazine, and she had told Scarlet to be back in half an hour and to get some exercise and to not get into trouble or talk to strangers. "I'm a stranger," pointed out Bod. "You're not," she said definitely. "You're a little boy." And then she said, "And you're my friend, so you can't be a stranger." Bod smiled, rarely, but he smiled then, hugely and with delight. "I'm your friend," he said. "What's your name?" "Bod. It's short for nobody." She laughed then. Funny sort of name, she said. What are you doing now? ABCs, said Bod. From the stones. I have to write them down. Can I do it with you? For a moment, Bod felt protective. The gravestones were his, weren't they? And then he realized how foolish he was being, and he thought that there were things that might be more fun done in the sunlight with a friend. He said, yes. They copied down names from tombstones, Scarlet helping Bod pronounce unfamiliar names and words, Bod telling Scarlet what the Latin meant if he already knew, and it seemed much too soon when they heard a voice further down the hill shouting, Scarlet! The girl thrust the crayons and paper back at Bod. I gotta go, she said. I'll see you next time, said Bod. Won't I? Where do you live? She asked. Here, he said, and he stood and watched her as she ran down the hill. On the way home, Scarlet told her mother about the boy called Nobody who lived in the graveyard and had played with her. And that night, Scarlet's mother mentioned it to Scarlet's father, who said that he believed that imaginary friends were a common phenomenon at that age, and nothing at all to be concerned about, and that they were fortunate to have a nature reserve so near. After that initial meeting, Scarlet never saw Bod first. On days when it was not raining, one of her parents would bring her to the graveyard. The parent would sit on the bench and read, while Scarlet would wander off the path, a splash of fluorescent green or orange or pink, and explore. Then, always sooner rather than later, she would see a small gray face and gray eyes staring up at her from beneath a mop of mouse-colored hair, and then Bod, and she would climb and she would play, hide and seek sometimes, or climbing things, or being quiet and watching the rabbits behind the old chapel. Bod would introduce Scarlet to some of his other friends. That she could not see them didn't seem to matter. She had already been told firmly by her parents that Bod was imaginary, and that there was nothing at all wrong with that. Her mother had, for a few days, even insisted on laying an extra place at the table for Bod, so it came as no surprise to her that Bod also had imaginary friends. He would pass their comments on to her. Bartleby says that thou dost have a face like unto a squished plum, he would tell her. So does he. Why does he talk so funny? Does he mean squashed tomato? I don't think they had tomatoes where he comes from, Bod said. And that's just how they talk then. Scarlet was happy. She was a bright, lonely child whose mother worked for a distant university, teaching people she never met face to face, grading English papers sent to her over the computer, and sending messages of advice or encouragement back. Her father taught particle physics, but there were, Scarlet told Bod, too many people who wanted to teach particle physics, and not enough people who wanted to learn it, so Scarlet's family had to keep moving to different university towns. In each town, her father would hope for a permanent teaching position that never came. What's particle physics? Asked Bod. Scarlet shrugged. Well, there's atoms, which is things that is too small to see, and that's what we're all made of. And there's things that are smaller than atoms, and that's particle physics. Bod nodded and decided that Scarlet's father was probably interested in imaginary things. Now I know, Will, they're so cute. Bard, it's not really specified. It's pretty much just assumed the present-ish, although let me double check when it was written. Published in 2008. Bod and Scarlet wandered the graveyard together every weekday afternoon, tracing names with their fingers, writing them down. Bod would tell Scarlet whatever he knew of the inhabitants of the grave or the mausoleum or the tomb, and she would tell him stories that she had been read or learned, and sometimes she would tell him about the world outside, about cars and buses and television and aeroplanes. Bod had seen them flying high overhead and had thought them loud silver birds, but had never been curious about them until now. He, in his turn, would tell her about the days when the people in the graves had been alive, how Sebastian Reader had been to London town and had seen the Queen, who had been a fat woman in a fur cap who glared at everyone and spoke no English. Sebastian Reader could not remember which queen she had been, but he did not think she had been queen for very long. When was this? Scarlet asked. He died in 1583, it says on his tombstone, so before then. Who's the oldest person here, in the whole graveyard? Asked Scarlet. Bod frowned. Probably Caius Pompeius? He came here 100 years after the Romans first got here. He told me about it. He liked the roads. So, he's the oldest? I think so. Can you make a little house in one of those stone houses? You can't get in. It's locked. They all are. Can you get in? Of course. Why can't I? The graveyard, he explained. I got the freedom of the graveyard. It lets me go places. I want to go in the stone houses and make little houses. You can't. You're just mean. Not. Meanie. Not. Scarlet put her hands into the pocket of her anorak and walked down the hill without saying goodbye, convinced that Bod was holding out on her, and at the same time suspecting that she was being unfair, which made her angrier. That night, over dinner, she asked her mother and father if there was anyone in the country before the Romans came. Where did you hear about the Romans? Asked her father. Everybody knows, said Scarlet, with withering scorn. Was there? There were Celts, said her mother. They were here first. They go back before the Romans. They were the people that the Romans conquered. On the bench beside the old chapel, Bod was having a similar conversation. The oldest? Said Silas. Honestly, Bod, I don't know. The oldest in the graveyard that I've encountered is Caius Pompeius, but there are people here before the Romans came. Lots of them, going back a long time. How are your letters coming along? Good, I think. When do I learn joined-up letters? Silas paused. I have no doubt, he said after a moment's reflection, that there are, among the many talented individuals interred here, that at least a smattering of teachers are. I shall make inquiries. Bod was thrilled. He imagined a future in which he could read everything, in which all stories could be opened and discovered. You've probably already figured at this point, but this does take place in England. When Silas had left the graveyard to go about his own affairs, Bod walked to the willow tree beside the old chapel and called Caius Pompeius. The old Roman came out of his grave with a yawn. Ah, yes. The living boy, he said. How are you, living boy? Bod said, I do very well, sir. Good, I'm pleased to hear it. The old Roman's hair was pale in the moonlight, and he wore the toga in which he'd been buried, with, beneath it, a thick woolen vest and leggings, because this was a cold country at the edge of the world, and the only place colder was Caledonia to the north, where the men were more animal than human and covered in orange fur, and were too savage even to be conquered by the Romans, so would be walled off in their perpetual winter. Hi, Mads. Glad to have you here, bestie. Reading bedtime stories, reading the graveyard book. Where was I? Walled off in the perpetual winter. Are you the oldest? Asked Bod. The oldest in the graveyard? I am. So, were you the first to be buried here? A hesitation. Almost the first, said Caius Pompeius. Before the Celts, there were other people on this island. One of them was buried here. Oh, Bod thought for a moment. Where's his grave? Caius pointed up the hill. He's at the top, said Bod. Caius shook his head. Then what? The old Roman reached down and ruffled Bod's hair. In the hill. Inside it. I was first brought here by my friends, followed in their turn by the local officials and the mimes, who wore the wax faces of my wife, taken by a fever and fuck, I can't read. Oh, it is Scottish lore. You know, I fully just forgot where the Celts were. That's on me. That is on me. It is Scottish lore. I always forget since that's not where Neil Gaiman lives. I just assume it's wherever he is. Oh, good luck with surgery, my friend. I just saw you just got out of surgery, so I'm absolutely glad to read you a story. I'm going to try and reread that sentence. In the hill, inside it. I was first brought here by my friends, followed in their turn by the local officials and the mimes who wore the wax faces of my wife, taken by a fever and camelodinum, and my father, killed in a border skirmish in Gaul. 300 years after my death, a farmer, seeking a new place to graze his sheep, discovered the boulder that covered the entrance and rolled it away, and went down, thinking there might be a treasure. He came out a little later, his dark hair now as white as mine. What did he see? Caius said nothing. Then he would not speak of it, or ever return. They put the boulder back, and in time they forgot. Then, 200 years ago, when they were building the Frobisher Vault, they found it once more. The young man who found the place dreamed of riches, so he told no one, and he hid the doorway behind Ephraim Pettifer's case, and went down one night, unobserved, or so he thought. Was his hair white when he came up? He did not come up. Oh. So, who is buried down there? Caius shook his head. I do not know, young Owens, but I felt him, back when this place was empty. I could feel something waiting, even then, deep in the hill. What was he waiting for? All I could feel, said Caius Pompeius, was the waiting. Good night, Jack. I'm so happy that I got you sleepy. Good night, my friend. I hope you sleep well. Y'all, I just went outside. There's 10 crows on my power line watching me. Bestie, that's an omen. That's a fucking omen. Shit, dude. Scarlet was carrying a large picture book. She sat next to her mother on the green bench near the gates, and she read her book while her mother inspected an educational supplement. The Romans did build a wall because they're afraid of the savage Scottish. It's very funny. That's incredibly funny. That is batshit. That is absolute batshit. An omen for what? I don't know the witch rhyme all the way. I'm not sure. You might have to do some Googling, my friend, because that... Ew. I always take crows as a personal, like, good omen, because I think they look cool as fuck and they make me extremely happy. So here's hoping. I think they look cool. Can y'all hear the music at all? I'm gonna bump it up a tiny bit. Let me know if it's too loud, though. There we go. Okay, good. I was a little worried. Is this too loud? This wasn't popping up the lines on Streamlabs. I don't trust it for shit, really. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay, so Scarlet is reading a book while her mother inspected an educational supplement. She enjoyed the spring sunshine, and she did her best to ignore the small boy who waved at her, first from behind an ivy-covered monument. Then, when she resolved to no longer look at the monument, the boy popped up, literally like a jack-in-the-box, from behind a tombstone. Joji G. Shoji, dated, death 1921. I was a stranger, and you took me in. He gestured toward her, frantically. She ignored him. Eventually, she put her book down on the bench. Mummy, I'm going for a walk now. Stay on the path, dear. She stayed on the path until she rounded the corner, and she could see Bod waving at her from further up the hill. She made a face at him. I found things out, said Scarlet. Me too, said Bod. They got beat so many times by the Klets that the Roman Empire made a wall to pull it, can't see no problem. That's very good. Oh, Celts. I heard Klets. Good for them. Good for the Celts. That's very good. I found a few things out, said Scarlet. Me too, said Bod. There were people before the Romans, she said, way back. They lived, I mean, when they died, they put them underground in these hills with treasure and stuff, and they were called barrows. Oh, right, said Bod. That explains it. Do you want to come and see one? Now? Scarlet looked doubtful. You don't really know where one is, do you? And you know I can't always follow where you go. She'd seen him slip through walls like a shadow. In reply, he held up a large rusted iron key. This was in the chapel, he said. It should open most of the gates up there. They used the same key for all of them. It was less work. Sorry, I was catching up with the chat. She scrambled up the hill beside him. You're telling the truth? He nodded, a pleased smile dancing at the corners of his lips. Come on, he said. It was a perfect spring day, and the air was alive with birdsong and bee hum. The daffodils bustled in the breeze, and here and there on the side of the hill, a few early tulips nodded. A blue powdering of forget-me-nots, and fine, fat yellow primroses punctuated the green of the slope as the two children walked up the hill toward the Frobisher's little mausoleum. It was old and simple in design, a small forgotten stone house with a metal gate for a door. Bod unlocked the gate with his key, and they went in. It's a hole, or a door, behind one of the coffins. They found it behind a coffin on the bottom shelf, a simple crawl space. Down there, said Bod. We go down there. Scarlet found herself suddenly enjoying the adventure much less. She said, We can't see down there. It's dark. I don't need light, said Bod. Not while I'm in the graveyard. I do, said Scarlet. It's dark. Bod thought about the reassuring things he could say, like, there's nothing bad down there, but the tales of hair turning white and people never returning meant that he could not have said them with a clear conscience, so he said, I'll go down. You wait for me up here. Scarlet frowned. You shouldn't leave me, she said. I'll go down, said Bod, and I'll see who's there, and I'll come back and tell you all about it. He turned to the opening, bent down, and clambered through on his hands and knees. He was in a space big enough to stand up in, and he could see steps cut into the stone. I'm going down the steps now, he said. Do they go down a long way? I think so. If you held my hand and told me where I was walking, then I could come with you. If you make sure I'm okay. Of course, said Bod, and before he had finished speaking, the girl was coming through the hole in her hands and her knees. You can stand up, Bod told her. He took her hand. The steps are just here. If you put a foot forward, you can find it. There. Now I'll go first. Can you really see? She asked. It's dark, said Bod, but I can see. He began to lead Scarlet down the steps, deep into the hill, and to describe what he saw to her as they went. It's steps down, he said, made of stone, and there's stone all above us. Someone's made a painting on the wall. 10 crows means a complete turnaround in luck, and they were all looking at me. Oh god, Mads, you sure need that. You ain't fucking going through it, bestie. Told you it was a good omen. Fucking knew it. Someone's made a painting on the wall. What kind of painting? A big hairy C is for cow, I think, with horns. Then something that's more like a pattern with like a big knot. It's sort of carved in the stone too, not just painted, see? And he took her fingers and placed them onto the carved knotwork. Stevie's always right. Thank you. I can feel it, she said. Now the steps are getting bigger. We're coming out into some kind of big room now, but the steps are still going. Don't move. Okay, now I'm between you and the room. Keep your left hand on the wall. They kept going down. One more step and we are on the rock floor, said Bod. It's a bit uneven. The room was small. There's a slab of stone on the ground and a low ledge in one corner with some small objects on it. There were bones on the ground, very old bones indeed, although below where the steps entered the room, Bod could see a crumpled corpse, dressed in the remains of a long brown coat. The young man who had dreamed of riches, Bod decided. He must have slipped and fallen in the dark. The noise began all around them, a rustling slither, like a snake twining through dry leaves. Scarlet's grip on Bod's hand was harder. What's that? Do you see anything? No. Scarlet made a noise that was half gasp and half wail, and Bod saw something too, and he knew without asking that she could see it too. There was a light at the end of the room, and in the light, a man came walking through the rock, and Bod heard Scarlet choking back a scream. The man looked well preserved, but still like something that had been dead a long time. His skin was painted, Bod thought, or tattooed, Scarlet thought, with purple designs and patterns. Around his neck hung a necklace of sharp, long teeth. I am the master of this place, said the figure, in words so ancient and guttural they were scarcely words at all. I guard this place from all who would harm it. His eyes were huge in his head. Bod realized it was because he had drawn circles around them in purple, making his face look like an owl's. Who are you? Said Bod. He squeezed Scarlet's hand as he said it. The indigo man did not seem to have heard the question. He looked at them fiercely. Leave this place, he said in words that Bod heard in his head, words that were also a guttural growl. Is he going to hurt us? Asked Scarlet. I don't think so, said Bod. Then, to the indigo man, he said, as he has been taught, I have the freedom of the graveyard, and I may walk where I choose. There was no reaction to this by the indigo man, which puzzled Bod even more, because even the most irritable inhabitants of the graveyard had been calmed by this statement. Bod said, Scarlet, can you see him? Of course I can see him. He's a big scary tattooey man and he wants to kill us. Bod, make him go away. Bod looked at the remains of the gentleman in the brown coat. There was a lamp beside him, broken on the rocky floor. He ran away, said Bod. He ran because he was scared, and he slipped or tripped on the stairs and fell off. Who did? The man on the floor. Scarlet sounded irritated now, as well as puzzled and scared. What man on the floor? It's too dark. The only man I can see is the tattooey man. Then, As if to make quite sure they knew he was there, the Indigo Man threw back his head and let out a series of yodeling screams, a full-throated howl that made Scarlet grip Bod's hand so tightly that her fingernails pressed into his flesh. Bod was no longer scared, though. "I'm sorry, I said they were imaginary," said Scarlet. "I believe now. They're real." The Indigo Man raised something over his head. "All who invade this place will die," he shouted in his guttural speech. He held a sharp stone blade. Bod thought about the man whose hair had turned white after he discovered the chamber, how he would never return to the graveyard or speak of what he had seen. "No," said Bod. "I think you're right. I think this one is." "Is what?" "Imaginary." "Don't be stupid," said Scarlet. "I can see it." "Yes," said Bod, "and you can't see dead people." He looked around the chamber. "You can stop now," he said. "We know it's not real." "I will feast on your liver," screamed the Indigo Man. "No, you won't," said Scarlet with a huge sigh. "Bod's right." Then she said, "I think maybe it's a scarecrow." "What's a scarecrow?" asked Bod. It's a thing farmers put in fields to scare crows." "Why would they do that?" Bod quite liked crows. He thought they were funny, and he liked the way they helped keep the graveyard tidy. "I don't know exactly. I'll ask Mummy." Oh shit. What? Oh my god. Thank you for raiding, my friend. I never get to hear that alert. Hi, little jacket thief. Super glad you've joined. Oh my god, this is thrilling. How is your stream, my friend? We are currently reading the Graveyard Book. I normally do games, but tonight is tonight is my lo-fi reading stream challenge. Great. This is going good. Well, real glad all y'all are here. This is very exciting. We're in the middle of chapter 2. It's going quite well. It's been very peaceful. My goal is to help people stream tonight. And again, normally I do quite energetic streaming, but I was sleepy and I had a challenge to fulfill, so thought tonight would be the night, so extremely vibey. Glad y'all are here too. Let me see, where was I? I don't know exactly. I'll ask Mummy. But I saw one from a train and I asked what it was. Crows think it's a real person. It's just a made-up thing that looks like a person, but it's not. It's just to scare the crows away. Bod looked around the chamber. He said, "Whoever you are, it isn't working. It doesn't scare us. We know it isn't real. Just stop." The Indigo Man stopped. It walked over to a rock slab and it lay down on it. Then it was gone. For Scarlet, the chamber was once more swallowed by the darkness. But in the darkness, she could hear the twining sound again, getting louder and louder, as if something was circling the round room. Something said, "We are the Sleer." The hairs on the back of Bod's neck began to prickle. The voice in his head was something very odd and very dry, like the scraping of a dead twig against the window of the chapel, and it seemed to Bod that there was more than one voice there, that they were talking in unison. "Did you hear that?" he asked Scarlet. "I didn't hear anything, just a slithery noise. It made me feel strange, all prickly in my tummy, like something horrible is going to happen." "Nothing horrible is going to happen," said Bod. Then, to the chamber, he said, "What are you?" "We are the Sleer. We guard and we protect." "What do you protect?" "The resting place of the Master. This is the holiest of all holy places, and it is guarded by the Sleer." "You can't touch us," said Bod. "All you can do is scare." The twining voices sounded petulant. "Fear is a weapon of the Sleer." Bod looked down at the ledge. "Are those the treasures of your master? An old brooch, a cup, and a little stone knife? They don't look like much." "The Sleer guards the treasures, the brooch, the goblet, the knife. We guard them for the Master. When he returns, it comes back. It always comes back." "How many of you are there?" But the Sleer said nothing. The inside of Bob's head felt as if it were filled with cobwebs, and he shook it, trying to clear it. Then he squeezed Scarlet's hand. "We should go," he said. He led her past the dead man in the brown coat, and honestly, thought Bod, if he hadn't gotten scared and fallen, the man would have been disappointed in his hunt for treasure. The treasures of 10,000 years ago were not the treasures of today. Bod led Scarlet carefully up the steps, through the hill, and into the jutting black masonry of the Frobisher Mausoleum. Late spring sunlight shone through the breaks in the masonry and through the barred door, shocking in its brightness, and Scarlet blinked and covered her eyes at the suddenness of the glare. Birds sang in the bushes, a bumblebee droned past. Everything was surprising in its normality. Bod pushed open the mausoleum door and then locked it again behind him. Scarlet's bright clothes were covered in grime and cobwebs, and her dark face and hands were pale with dust. Further down the hill, somebody, quite a few somebodies, was shouting loudly, shouting frantically. Someone called, "Scarlet? Scarlet Perkins?" And Scarlet said, "Yes, hello?" And before she and Bod had a chance to discuss what they'd seen, or talk about the Indigo Man, there was a woman in a fluorescent yellow jacket with police on the back, demanding to know if she was okay and where she had been and if someone had tried to kidnap her, and then the woman was talking on a radio, letting them know that the child had been found. Bod slipped along beside them as they walked down the hill. The door to the chapel was open, and inside, both the Scarlet's parents were waiting, her mother in tears, her father worriedly talking to people on a mobile phone, along with another policewoman. No one saw Bod as he waited in the corner. People kept asking Scarlet what had happened to her, and she answered as honestly as she could, told them about a boy called Nobody who took her deep inside a hill where a purple tattoo man appeared in the dark, but he was really a scarecrow. They gave her a chocolate bar, and they wiped her face, and asked if the tattooed man had ridden a motorbike, and Scarlet's mother and father, now that they were relieved and not afraid for her any longer, were angry with themselves and with her, and they told each other that it was the other one's fault for letting their little girl play in a cemetery, even if it was a nature reserve, and that the world was a very dangerous place these days, and if you didn't keep your eyes on your children every second, you could not imagine what awful things they would be plunged into, especially a child like Scarlet. Scarlet's mother began sobbing, which made Scarlet cry, and one of the policewomen got into an argument with Scarlet's father, who tried to tell her that he, as a taxpayer, paid her wages, and she told him that she was a taxpayer too, and probably paid his wages, while Bod sat in the shadows in the corner of the chapel, unseen by anyone, not even Scarlet, and watched and listened until he could take no more. It was twilight in the graveyard by now, and Silas came and found Bod, up near the amphitheater, looking out over the town. He stood beside the boy, and he said nothing, which was his way. "It wasn't her fault," said Bod. "It was mine. Now she's in trouble." "Where did you take her?" asked Silas. "Into the middle of the hill to see the oldest grave. Only there isn't anybody in there. Just a snaky thing called a sleer who scares people." "Fascinating." They walked back down the hill together, watched as the old chapel was locked up once more, and the police and Scarlet and her parents went off into the night. "Mrs. Burrows will teach you joined-up letters," said Silas. "Have you read The Cat in the Hat yet?" "Yes," said Bod, "ages ago. Can you bring me more books?" "I expect so," said Silas. "Do you think I'll ever see her again? The girl?" "I very much doubt it." But Silas was wrong. 3 weeks later, on a gray afternoon, Scarlet came to the graveyard, accompanied by both her parents. They insisted that she remain inside at all times, although they trailed a little behind her. Scarlet's mother occasionally exclaimed about how morbid this all was, and how fine and good it was that they would soon be leaving it behind forever. When Scarlet's parents began to talk to each other, Bod said, "Hello." "Hi," said Scarlet, very quietly. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I told them I wouldn't go with them unless they brought me back here one last time." "Go where?" "Scotland. There's a university there for Dad to teach particle physics." They walked on the path together, a small girl in a bright orange anorak, and a small boy in a gray winding sheet. "Is Scotland a long way away?" "Yes," she said. "Oh. I hoped you'd be here to say goodbye. I'm always here." "But you aren't dead, are you, Nobody Owens?" "Of course not. You can't stay here all your life, can you? One day you'll grow up, and then you'll have to go and live in the world outside." He shook his head. "It's not safe for me out there." "Who says?" "Silas, my family, everybody." She was silent. Her father called, "Scarlet, come on, love, time to go. You've had your last trip to the graveyard. Now let's go home." Scarlet said to Bod, "You're brave. You are the bravest person I know, and you are my friend. I don't care if you are imaginary." And she fled down the path, back the way they'd come, to her parents and the world. So that is the end of chapter 2. Oh man, the next one's really cool. They're so good. This book is so goddamn good, y'all. Shit, we read 60 pages in 2 hours. That's like a solid rate, I would say. This is delightful. I really, really love this book. I'm gonna do another poll real quick before I wrap up. I want to see if I should keep doing streams like this. No, I know, Will. It's such a good book. Basically, I'm trying to decide whether this should just be like a one-time thing, if I should continue doing it. What type of fan art should I do? I would say do one where Bod and Scarlet are like walking along the path together, him in like his gray winding sheet, and her in like her bright like orange anorak. Okay. Great. Okay, I'm glad that a lot of y'all seem to like them. I don't want to like replace my content with like just reading streams, of course, since most people follow me for SatMF or like just like regular gaming streams. Oh, I like this song. They will be holding hands because friends be cute. No, you're right. You should say it. Thank you for the bits, Will. Excuse me. Okay, word. Yeah. Yeah, I'll try and keep these up every now and then, especially for my European friends who tend to have to stay up late to see my streams. I would like to not keep them up in order for them to join Stevie Book Club. No, you're right. I have some good ones. It's true. I mean, listen, the books in the menu up there, those are good ones. Those are really, really good ones. So I suppose I'm about good to go for the night. Thank you all for all the bits and all the subs. I'm sleepy myself, honestly. I feel very peaceful right now. But if you're somewhere where it's the morning, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you're somewhere where it's the evening, I hope you have a great night, and I hope you sleep well and have wonderful dreams. Don't forget to drink water, please. Have a snack, feed yourself. Please take care of yourself. It's very important. And I hope you have a wonderful night, day, or morning, or whatever time zone you're in. And I will see you in the next one. So that will likely be Thursday. Though I may try doing a bonus stream tomorrow. I'm still deciding. So yeah, I will see you in the next one. I love ya. Bye.